I wanted to talk about condo terminations and condo buyouts, as this is something that's likely going to be a major thing in the future, especially for states like Florida, where we have a ton of old buildings that are no longer in good enough shape for people to live in. And this building that you guys are looking at right behind me is actually the perfect example of that. I was actually here back in April, the end of April of 2023, and this building now has been closed down for the past 7 months. So people used to live here. It's a normal residential building, but they had some major structural issues, and everybody was forced to move out within a span of like a few days. And so, as you guys can see, this place is sitting empty. They have fences around here, no trespassing signs, and all of this. And fast forward 7 months later, it's actually Thanksgiving Day today. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. This place was not maintained for the last 50 or 60 years and has led to this situation now where all of their residents were forced to move out against their will, and practically overnight. You guys can even see up here, like some of the windows were even still like left open, things like that. You know, people probably still have like furniture in there in some cases, whatever they couldn't actually get out. It's a complete disaster and really a nightmare for anybody who's in this situation. In this case, what happened was there was an engineering report that came out from this building, and there was concerns about sagging floors. They also had a lot of termite damage, and there was a lot of fear over the safety of the residents. And so the owners of the building are now required to come up with a plan to make it safe, and nobody knows when they're going to be able to come up with the money for this, when they're going to be able to get any of this done, when they're going to be able to have people move back in. Nothing, guys. And it's one thing if you were renting here, fine, you can just pack your stuff up and leave and go back and find a new rental. But what if you were an owner here? What happens then? If you're an owner, you have your HOA dues. Are the people that own units here still being forced to pay their HOA dues? What about property taxes? You still own this property according to Miami-Dade County. Are they still collecting the full property tax bill from people? What about your homeowner's insurance? What about your mortgage? What about all of these things that are associated with owning a property, and then slam, you get kicked out overnight, right? So that's why talking about these condo terminations and condo buyouts is important, because if more of these condo buyouts continue to happen or don't continue to happen, we're likely to see more situations like this building right here. Now, I have no idea if they have to continue to keep paying all these expenses related to the property, but my guess is probably at least some of it needs to be paid still. Maybe some of them don't have to pay the mortgage in the meantime, but I doubt that the city and the county is giving up their right to collect property taxes on this while it's sitting here empty. And what about the HOA fees for the building? Are they just not collecting it and not paying any of the insurance and not paying any expenses? So a place that was already in bad shape is going to continue to deteriorate because no one's here maintaining it or doing anything to keep this place in good shape. And imagine if none of these expenses are actually waived and people do have to continue paying the HOA, the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and all of these things that go along with it, and this place is sitting here empty. How fair is that? My guess is by the time they ever get this building fixed, everybody here is going to be bankrupt. Nobody's going to be able to afford to continue paying for all this indefinitely while it's just sitting here empty. So when it comes to condo buyouts and condo terminations, this is becoming a big thing here in Miami in particular, but all throughout Florida, where you have old buildings like this one that get turned into new buildings like this one and this one here. And it's not even just happening with old condos, it's also happening with old houses. I've shown you guys numerous times since I've been back here in Miami for just a little over a month now, how many times we've seen, you know, people tearing down an old house and building up a brand new one. And obviously all of the value for these properties is in the land, right? Like, people want this prime waterfront real estate. And I'm actually surprised that 7 months have gone by and this place is still sitting here empty and nobody has bought it out or attempted to relieve these homeowners and give them a large chunk of change so that way they can just demolish this old place that probably should be demolished anyways and build something more suitable to today. Now, when there's a condo termination or a condo buyout, basically what that constitutes is when 80% of the unit owners in the building decide to sell their unit to a developer, and they eventually take over that condo and terminate the condo so it's no longer a condo. And eventually the goal is to get everybody out of the building so that way they can tear it down and build something new. And I can see this happening well into the future here for all of Florida, especially now that we have these new condo laws on the books that are going to be taking effect starting in 2025. Because what these new condo laws are going to do is it's going to build up a massive amount of financial pressure for buildings that have not been run properly, for buildings that do not collect enough in HOA fees now, that do not have reserves, that do not keep up with repairs, and they either end up like this one where it's completely condemned, or they're forced to turn things around and make all the necessary repairs and collect the amount that they need to be collecting in reserves. But in order for them to do that, that usually involves the HOA fees going up substantially. And I always turn back to this same one, guys. Like, there is a building here that one of my clients owns in Miami where the maintenance fee is currently about $830 per month for a one-bedroom, okay? But starting in 2025, it's going to be $2,400 a month because the building operates on a no reserve policy. So every single year, all the owners in the building vote to have no reserves here, and the consequences of that are pretty severe moving forward. Because when your HOA fee goes from $800 to $2,400 a month, my guess is that the vast majority of people won't be able to afford that, and they're either, one, going to try to panic sell, and it's going to completely lower the values in the building like that, where everybody's trying to get out at the same time, or number two, they'll turn to a developer to buy out the building and do a condo termination and do a condo buyout. And I think most developers would be happy to jump on a place like that because it's a waterfront building, it's on the intracoastal waterway, and I'm sure they can make a nice profit by tearing it down and building something brand new in its place. The good news is for people who are facing a condo buyout situation, most of the time developers will pay people at least fair market value, if not quite a bit higher. In every case that I've pretty much ever seen, people make substantially more money off of getting bought out from a developer than if they were just to sell their unit to somebody who wants to live in it. And the reason for that is simple, because they can still overpay you and still turn a massive profit with the prices that they charge for these brand new buildings here. And honestly, I think it's not such a bad thing that this happens, in the sense that, well, you have an old building like that one back there that we looked at that's not in good shape, and probably like this one here, it's also pretty old and could be next on the chopping block. When you have places like this, it almost makes more sense to just tear it down and start fresh with something new, rather than to try to fix something that's very old and has already been abused for so many years and hasn't been maintained properly. The problem is, you guys see a building like this is totally different than a building like that one over there, right? So the cost to live in a place like this is substantially lower than living in the other place. So what it does is it ends up driving people out of the area and gentrifies the neighborhood. So that's the biggest complaint most people have with this, which is understandable. Now, condo terminations will usually go one of three ways, and this is how it goes normally. The first way is that developer makes an offer to the condo association board for a bulk amount of the residences and the land. The association then shares the offer with its owners, and a vote is held. The developer would need 80% of the vote and 5% or less of the residents rejecting termination plans in order to gain control of the condo. So this might not be something that would probably work the first time around, unless you have a building where, like I said, the HOA fees just tripled and everybody's desperate to get out. Then you'd probably have a very high probability of 80% of the residents signing on to this right from the get-go, versus a place that doesn't have any current problems and doesn't have financial issues. It's going to be much more difficult to get 80% of people to sign on right off the bat. The second way that this can go is the developer will buy residences individually, and they influence the condo policies in order to gain more condos. And they might even push for large assessments in order to kind of squeeze people out, which is really the shadier way to do it, if you ask me, because little by little you start gaining more and more control of the building and, you know, forcing people out because they know they can't pay, and then that's kind of like taking advantage of people. And then the third way that it's usually done is that the developers will buy up residences individually once again, but the board of directors will be basically on the side of the developer in trying to push this to happen, and the board of directors for the condo will work with a bunch of different owners trying to basically broker a deal and convince them why that they should be doing this. So then the question becomes, if you live in a building where this is actively the case and of developers trying to buy you out, should you go for it or should you resist? Should you hold out? Well, it definitely depends on what your future plans are, how you ultimately see living the rest of your life. But a couple important things to consider is how much are they offering you, because typically developers will offer you anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 times market value for your unit, and that's kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity that you could take that money and move somewhere else. But for some people, they might have lived there their whole life, for example, and they don't know where else to go. Maybe even with the buyout and even getting, 2.5 times market value, they still wouldn't be able to afford to buy something else in the area. That's something that can easily influence your decision. Another thing to consider is how many people are going for these buyouts. Which one of these three situations is your building in? Is the developer buying out units one by one, trying to forcefully take over the building? Is it more of a peaceful takeover where they're just giving everybody a blanket offer and seeing if people bite? What's happening? Because if you see, like, say it's a hostile takeover and the developer owns only 20 units, but a lot of the 80% of the other people really don't want to sell, then it might be worth it to resist it and not let them take over, especially if a lot of the other neighbors are on board with that, as well as people having the financials to be able to withstand and keep the building going, and that the building is in good shape financially. But on the other hand, if a lot of your neighbors are agreeing to this and the building's not in the greatest shape financially, you don't really have much to gain by holding out and not selling to the developer, because all you're really going to do is make it more difficult on yourself. And there was a recent situation with this where this happened across the bay here in Miami, and what happened was you had units that were selling in this building for $1.5 million, and now the developer's only offering to give these people like $500,000 to leave because they're like the last holdout. So they kind of have them by the balls, so to speak, and don't want to give them any money because they don't have any position of power, these owners. They have nothing left. The developer has already taken over the building. So you don't want to be the last man standing in one of these situations either. Now, regardless, the association should probably hire an attorney that can help with this process, especially if a lot of people are interested, whether or not people are interested in selling or not, because if people want to sell, then it's in their best interest to get the highest and best price from the developer and also make the developer pay for all these fees associated with transitioning the property over, as well as getting people the best price and paying for their attorney on top of that. This is very normal. But on the other hand, if a lot of people are resistant to the idea of selling, but you have a developer that's trying to take over, equally hiring an attorney to help put up a lot of barriers for them to be able to take over is also going to be in everybody's best interest if they don't want the building to be bought out. Because you really never know how much you might be able to get. You might have one developer that says, yeah, we'll give you $100 million for the building, but if somebody says they'll give you that much, maybe somebody else is willing to give you $120 million. So it's good to have professionals on your side that can help negotiate this stuff. This is likely to continue happening all over the state, guys. It might spread to other states too. But right now, Florida is the poster child for this because of the new condo laws that are going to be coming down the pipeline. And let's face it, even without these new condo laws, people are still facing huge property tax increases right now, huge insurance increases, and just those things alone can make owning a place unaffordable that was affordable just a few years ago. Trust me, I know. I'm not saying I can't afford where I live, but I am saying that the costs have gone up substantially since I've moved in just over the past couple of years. So it's being predicted right now that we could see a ton of condo terminations between now and the next 10 years from now as this situation continues to get worse. And the other thing is if you're in a building right now that's looking at getting a big buyout, you might want to take advantage of it sooner than later, because the more buildings that are looking for buyouts later on because things aren't going well and people are broke, then the less money people are going to get, because it's just another thing. It's just another real estate dynamic of supply and demand. The more buildings that are up for sale where they're looking for buyouts, then the less developers are going to be willing to give, because they're going to have their pick, right? I mean, personally, if it were me and I had a developer come and offer to buy out my unit for 2.5 times market value, even double the market value, I would probably sign that deal in a heartbeat, guys, especially with how much I have seen the expenses rise in the building, and I just think it's going to continue to be like that for quite some time. I don't think that the expenses are ever going to go down. They're always going to continue to go up. Even though you might have the lion's share of it happen within the next couple of years, and then maybe it kind of levels out from there, it's still expensive, you know? And if somebody were going to give me, you know, $1.5–2 million for my place, I would just take it and run. Because I could live practically anywhere I wanted to with that kind of money. Because honestly, I would look at that as a blessing, you know, that you're making all of this money, you're coming into a windfall. It's kind of like having a small lottery winning in a way that you can take advantage of. That might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Another thing we're seeing right now, besides the uptick of these condo terminations and buyouts, is more and more people continuing to move forward and buy a home, even though it's not a good time to buy. And people recognize it's not a good time to buy. Like literally 85% of people in Fannie Mae's last home buyer sentiment survey said that they think it's a bad time to buy a home. So that's basically everyone. But yet you have people continuing to do it, not nearly as many as before since home sales are in the toilet, but people are still doing it. And there was a good story about this today, talking about some of the reasons that people are doing this, and none of it's really that surprising, but I wanted to go over it because I think a lot of people might be able to relate to this. So the first story follows a couple that have children up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They pretty much got sized out of their current home. You know, they were tripping over toys with all of their kids around and decided, you know what, we need to have a bigger place to live. We can't wait forever. Even though we have a good interest rate on the house we have now, we have to pull the trigger and move because this place is just too small for our family. So they paid $710,000 for their new home in Pittsburgh. It's a brand new house. They were able to lock in a 6.5% interest rate. Their reasoning and logic was basically this. They said, you know, there's never an economically perfect time to buy, so we just had to do what felt right for our family. And the reason why I think this is important is because it shows you a couple of things. Number one is that people are willing to do whatever it takes to keep their family happy, right? Well, that's a perfect example right there of why you're going to see a lot of people give up these 3% interest rates that all the experts are saying that no one's ever going to give this up, guys, because we're seeing examples of people giving it up right now for the very reasons that we thought that they would, just because life goes on. Now, the second story is from a couple who sold their house in Dallas, and they were able to get a bidding war happen on their house, and they were able to sell the house for a lot more than they originally paid for it. And they moved from Dallas to Seattle. Once they found the house that they really wanted to buy in Seattle, of course, their real estate agent said, hey, you need to jump on this right now before it's gone, because properties were still flying off the market then. And so they bought this house for $1.45 million that didn't even have a kitchen, and it needed about $80,000 of additional work done to the house. They also had to settle for a much higher mortgage rate, and they had to get a 6.6% mortgage rate, and before they had a 3.25% rate. But they say they have no regrets because they were tired of the extremely hot weather in Dallas, and now they love the more mild weather in Seattle. And man, I can relate to that one for sure. And one super important detail that we can't overlook with this second couple's story is this house that they paid $1.45 million for, plus another 80 grand in renovations, was at the very top of their budget. So they had to stretch to the maximum to be able to buy this house, which is another good point that I wanted to bring up about what people are doing in order to buy real estate today. People are stretching to the absolute maximum they can to buy these houses, guys. And one small financial hiccup, anything goes wrong in their life, that's it. They're probably not going to be able to pay for this place, and they're likely probably in the category of these people who earn 6 figures a year that are paycheck to paycheck, because typically people wouldn't be making a decision to buy a house that expensive if it's going to put them at the very top of their budget. That's not really the smart financial move to do. And another important thing to note from this is it pushes up the area's median home prices as well, because clearly only people that have a good amount of cash are able to buy houses like this. You need to have a high income. You need to have a lot of money in the bank for a huge down payment to buy a house that costs $1.5 million. And so since real estate sales have crashed through the floor in terms of the amount of closed sales, the houses that are selling are quite expensive, which helps push up the median home price kind of in an artificial way. But the point of this story is that it shows you how far people are willing to go to buy in this market today, even though 85% of people say it's not a good time to buy. And it also proves what I've been saying for the past year and a half, essentially, that, oh, people say no one's ever going to give up these low interest rates. Well, clearly that is not true, because people are giving them up right now because they think it's the right thing to do. They think it's the right thing to do for their family. They're tired of living where they live, and they were able to sell their house for a good profit and stretch to the max to buy something else. So yeah, that's fine. We'll take a 6.6% interest rate from our 3.5. And obviously today, those numbers would be even higher unless you pay down and pay some points. So this is what people are doing, guys. I personally don't think it's that smart, but it just goes to show you that no matter what's happening in the market, life goes on. People will continue to buy and sell real estate regardless of what's happening. Man, these birds here are going insane. All these green parrots. I'm sure you guys can hear it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.